But welcome everybody, early birds here that are arriving to our webinar. Hope everyone is okay. And I think we're about ready to roll. So everybody, welcome to this special fireside chat. Hopefully everyone is familiar already with how Zoom works. So this is a Zoom webinar, just as a few housekeeping rules for everybody. Obviously, we have I think the chat is disabled, folks. So use the Q&A if you want to sort of connect with us or ask any specific questions. We can just go ahead and use the questions there and we'll pull them into the conversation. So best way to interact is check out the Q&A and pop the details in there. Hopefully the audio and visual is fine for everybody. Today, I'm delighted to be hosting this webinar. 2025, I think, is going to turn out to be a kind of a watershed moment for us in talent acquisition. I have the feeling we're going to look back on this year as the year in which the AI agent really arrived into our day-to-day work. And I put it to you that probably in the next 6 to 12 months, you will be interacting with some sort of software that could be described as agentic. And it is very important, I think, for us in TA to really understand what this means for our personal work, our productivity targets, what the impact is, and all of the human stakeholders in the hiring process, and how it kind of reformulates and reshapes the work that we do. So today, I'm delighted to be hosting this chat because we need some real life examples as to how some of the early movers with agentic AI have actually deployed. What has been the outcomes? What have been the challenges? What have been the things that we've learned from some of these early pioneering businesses that we can take away and be equipped for our own journey, our own inevitable journey with agentic AI. So today's topic, we're going to bring in a brilliant case study from S&P Global, and I'm delighted to welcome our fellow panelists onto this show. So I want to do some quick introductions. Let's go with you, Tiffany. Firstly, can you quickly introduce yourself and what it is you do?
Absolutely. So Tiffany Clark, I'm the global head of people solutions and advisory support here at S&P Global. So I have a couple different functions under my remit. We have our candidate care team, which is our recruiting operations team, our people services, which is our shared service function, responsible as well as for all of our people technology, and then also our global program and processes, and then our regional people advisors. And I'm based virtually in Atlanta, and I've been at S&P for 10 years. Actually, 11,
Fantastic stuff.
sorry, 11 years.
Uh, 11 years. You've been there so long. It's like part of the furniture, Tiffany. But brilliant to actually see the transition of that business over time and also how the evolution of the TA function has been. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your input and insights on this. Charles, why don't you go ahead?
Great. Charles Ma, I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Good Time. Really excited to meet all of you. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and prior to Good Time, I spent about 18 years leading talent in companies like Workday and SAP. So it's always great to have conversations with leaders like Tiffany around leadership and talent and how we think about AI going forward in the future. So thanks, Hong, for having me.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And Arun, great to see you as always. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, certainly. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Good Time. We founded Good Time back in 2017. And Good Time has definitely evolved into more of an orchestration layer that really helps candidates go from application all the way to hired. We use AI and agents to be able to really orchestrate the entire hiring process. And we are extremely honored to be working with Tiffany and helping with the hiring process at S&P Global. So really excited to tell you more about that today. And I'm based in Las Vegas.
Yeah, fantastic. Great stuff. Let's go straight to you, Tiffany. When was the moment that you basically made the decision, okay, we're gonna just jump into this? Do you remember the sort of the event that caused you to think, you know what, we can't kind of soft shoe this, we're gonna just go all in?
Yeah, so I would say S&P, we technically started our AI journey in 2019 with the acquisition of Kensho, which is, an AI powered a solution within our organization. But I would say as a people team, what really accelerated our AI journey within the people team is when we merged with IHS in 2022. It really, we increased our volume as an organization. Obviously, that brought more processes, more people, more workflows, and we really wanted to look at how do we continue to explore and deploy some AI use cases so that we can really optimize our processes and really find and unlock those productivity opportunities for our team, especially our back end functions. So I would say 2019 officially, but I would say really going head first 2022.
Yeah, and really interesting that the corporate background makes a difference, doesn't it? Like sometimes when there is a big merger or acquisition, it is obviously something that is going to be a huge job of work. So why not use the opportunity to really reinvent? Because it won't be a smooth running machine. You got two cultures, two processes, two tech stacks to crash together. So perfectly timed, so to say, when it comes down to where the moment was in AI. Um, a question that probably we need to kind of really tee up at the beginning, and I want to open this up to anybody sort of on the panel to give a shot at. But how do we distinguish between agentic AI and, a lot of stuff that might be described as just automation or, non-agentic AI? Like, do you guys have a working definition that you think, okay, this is pretty solid in most cases, and we should go with this? Tiffany, let's address it to you first, actually, but I'd love to hear Charles and Irene a bit later.
Yeah, absolutely. So I look at traditional automation as more linear, like you're more focused on moving steps along a process, sending out reminders, updating status. But when you really look at agentic AI, you're really orchestrating all of those different activities, right? The agent is handling the orchestration of looking across the calendars, booking the rooms, updating the schedule. And that orchestration really unlocks the potential, specifically for S&P, for our coordinators to really focus on the hiring manager and the candidate experience. So I think it's how the agentic agents really unlock that productivity. It handles a lot of that orchestration. It's leveraging the data and the insights to make more informed decisions versus with like traditional automation, it's more about optimizing and streamlining the steps in a process.
Yeah, that's really, really good insight there. Folks, let us know what your thoughts are. I mean, have you got how clear in your mind is the distinction between agentic AI and AI or automation? Is that clear in your mind, or is it somehow confused? It would be good to kind of have a little bit of a dialogue on this because I suspect that it's, through discourses where we're going to start crystallizing some of these distinctions. Charles, give it your shot. You've come from both sides of the fence, quite unusual in the sense, obviously, you've been the operator, now you're on the vendor side. How do you distinguish between agentic AI and non-agentic AI?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Hung. I think how Tiffany described it is actually described very well. Is the fact is, for me, particularly when it comes to HR, is linear transactions is where automations kind of succeed. It's like taking one, like for example, sourcing, right? You find a profile you want to then execute a next step, and it takes a next step after that. I think for agentic, the difference I see in it is it's almost literally a partner to you to help you to drive faster and better results. So in other words, it thinks along the way of all the nuances and the edge cases that things happen. And we know specifically, I'm going to be a little bit biased here, is when scheduling happens, is nothing happens in a linear way. Like you can program in GPS. That is a perfect way I see some level of agentic play nowadays is the eyes and ears of a phone to be able to see many people across a region and helping you to find the best routes real time in a dynamic fashion. And so I think from a agentic perspective, it is the ability to take all those nuances, have many different algorithms that work with each other to giving you the best outcome versus something that is much more of a standard rule-based. I like to hear, one of our co-founders loves to use word decision tree, decision-based process, right? In a perfect world, decision-based process could work, but obviously we live in a less than perfect world. So agentic, I feel, is more of that dynamic-based AI versus more of that static-based.
Yeah, really good, Charles. Folks, I hope that helps sort of your thought process and sort of how you're going to enjoy the rest of this show. Tiffany, let's bring it out of the abstract and into the concrete. How does it actually look to the team when you've deployed some of these agents in the production environment? Like, how does that actually work? Can you give us like an example that would help illustrate?
Yes, I think it's first identifying, the use case, right? The use case for us was we were having challenges with scheduling. We were currently 41 steps to actually be able to schedule a candidate, and that's one candidate. And we really wanted to reduce that. And so I think with, looking at the use case, looking at who is actually going to benefit from the use case. So we saw that we had three persona groups. Well, technically four that would be benefit from this particular type of agentic workflow. So we have our recruiters, we have our candidate care team, we have our hiring managers, and we also have our candidates, right? And so really being able to identify like one, what's the problem? Who are the personas that this is going to solve for? And then really identifying what's the solution for that. And so I think that is what we took in a approach from deployment. We also looked at a use case that we felt was minimum risk, right? I know there's a lot of concerns about deploying AI in the environment, especially for HR. But when we looked at, particularly scheduling, there was a minimum risk and related to, data privacy. There's a lot of, guardrails and restrictions that we could put up in regards to firewalls between, the calendar and the tooling itself. So again, we looked at what is the problem? Who's it going to solve for, right? Is it a large enough persona group that it's really going to solve the solution? And then looking at the use case across the board and then picking a minimum risk for the use case and then deploying it out.
Yeah, how long has this been live, Tiffany? Like, how long have you sort of been running some of these agents in the environment there?
Yeah, so we started, I think we deployed last year, Q4 of 2024. So we're
Mhm.
coming up into our 1 year of being fully deployed out.
Yeah, yeah, really interesting. It's probably enough time for us to figure out exactly how it has impacted the work of the team that you had, like the recruiters and the recruitment coordinators. So I wonder whether you could sort of tell us sort of how that has changed. Like, how has it reshaped the jobs that these guys have done, particularly as we can anticipate a lot of the workload would have been shifted onto the agent by now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked a little bit about the steps. So again, our care team was spending about 41 steps to be able to interview. We've reduced that to 8 steps. It was taking them about 30 minutes to schedule one interview. That's been reduced to 5 minutes. And then we're also estimating that we're on track year to date to save about 2,460 hours annually of productivity given back to the candidate care team. So that's really been giving them the opportunity to be able to really reshift their focuses and really work on the interactions that matter, right? So that coordination, that communication between candidate care and our recruiters is critical, right? They are, the front line to our hiring managers and our candidates. So, giving some time back for them to be able to coordinate on the interactions that matter. Also allowing them to kind of start to shift their focus more on that more candidate experience, right? How are we bringing people in the door? How are we onboarding after their interviews? And then again, providing that type of touch to our hiring managers as we guide them through the process. So it's really been able to unlock that type of productivity savings for them to really start to focus on moments that matter and then also look at other areas within the processes to optimize as well.
Yeah, that's great illustration. Ariane, let's go to you with this. It's probably one of the questions that's starting to emerge in the discourse around sort of automation and efficiency and so on. Efficiency, we can say, has probably been the dominant story when it comes to AI. But then the question is, okay, what do we do with the excess time that we've now saved? Where does that go? And it's great to hear from Tiffany to say, actually, we're going to repipe that, pipe it back in to those experience gains to the candidates and the other human stakeholders in the process. How would you say is best to try and maintain that line? Because I can imagine that there's pressure always when you've achieved efficiency. Is that okay? Next year, just get even more efficient, and you keep like doubling down, and you think, hang on, where's this time going, and how do we make sure that it comes back to the TA team? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, definitely with the agentic AI, automation technology, all the, evolution of technology, I think we will continue to be more efficient, we'll get more productive, we'll get more time back. But actually, last week I was at Workday Rising, and one of the keynote speakers was Brene Brown, and she mentioned something that kind of hit me. She said people got really bad at being human. Uh, and that was like, it kind of hit me like a rock. And what she meant was, what recruiters used to be really good at was like exciting candidates, like talking to them, understanding their personal needs and customizing the process for them. Like, really knowing them on a personal level and being able to really let them know why this is the perfect offer, perfect, workplace for them. That excitement, that's completely irreplaceable. AI won't be able to do that. Right. And I think all the time that we are getting back, I think we really have to find that kind of route that we used to be really good at. And I think we'll continue to kind of go back to it. I think with the technology, we really got like almost like click obsessed. We got really good at technical stuff. We got really good at using software. But I think we kind of lost touch with being really good at humans and their empathy and their excitement and everything. So I think with the time back, we will definitely continue to find more things that can make candidate experience more high touch, more truly white glove, more customized, more personal. And also along with that, I think we can absolutely really up level the people that we have to be more knowledgeable and more equipped with how to utilize AI, how to utilize softwares, and being able to be managers of AI agents and know how to orchestrate the softwares that they have so that the experience the candidates, interviewers, hiring managers, and all the other stakeholders go through, that experience is really amazing and is really perfectly orchestrated. So I think there's like so much we can do and on a lot of level with the time back. So I'm not afraid that the time that we get back, we will be just twiddling our thumb and we have nothing to do. Actually, I think it's super exciting now that AI agent will be really taking over the technical aspect of our job and more of a mundane and repeatable part of our job. We can actually do a lot more things that are more human and also really craft the perfect experience for everyone that's going through our hiring process. So I think it's super exciting.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And Brene Brown, obviously, great to listen to her whenever you get the chance. And I really, the line that you kind of, that Brene used, I just resonated immediately when you said it, Arian. It's almost like the internet kind of created a different type of recruiter because suddenly we were all like literally spending time learning Boolean, for all these deep research. Yes, we need that. We need to be able to find and extract information from systems, especially inefficient systems. But now that AI has arrived in such a way that it looks like it's going to solve some of those problems, we kind of need to rediscover the DNA of what a recruiter is. Not always easy, though, Charles, because it may well be in that 20-year period, we've kind of cultivated and coached people towards a route of being more technical. How do we make sure that actually they go back to learning this human side? How do we make sure that, they're not like spending excess time doing the sourcing and doing the tactical stuff and thinking more about, okay, this higher touch work, and then moving up that sort of value chain, providing that advisory services to both candidate and the recruiter. How do we coach, I guess, recruiters back into that role? Have you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, Hung, I think it starts with how we've been incentivizing recruiters as well. I think about whether it's sales, marketing, customer success, recruiters, it's all the same as if you incentivize behaviors around tactical results faster, right? More. Those things are generally things where AI is disrupting in this moment. I know I love to kind of think about just from a pure coincidental perspective that when I was at Workday and I was leading the TA team there, one of the key things we were thinking about is how do you shift behaviors by incentivizing on experiences? And one of those things when you start thinking about experiences, Hung, is we often think about, all right, you do a candidate survey and typically say, hey, look, we got like an 80% satisfaction. Well, guess what? Most of those are hired candidates. So then you add an extra element. What about the non-hired candidates? And if the non-hired candidates get a high NPS score, then you start looking at potentially coaching folks to think about how many candidates decide to stay in the community. And those stayed in the community over 2 years, how many evolved into other roles? Now, those are forcing relationship-based skills, which Arian had mentioned around building those relationships, being the seller, inspiring candidates to think about yourself as an employer. I think it is about number one, realigning those metrics, and then number two, thinking about redeveloping your coaching programs, your training programs towards those behaviors. And I just recently spoke with a VP of talent of a large software company, and she said, you know what, Charles, one thing, and we've talked about this for years, is that we typically have always hired recruiters just to get a capacity number result. So you think about contract recruiters that are posted, it's like an easy in, easy out thing. I hate to say it, and that's what really ticks off recruiters. Well, think about creating a recruiter like an accountant role or like a lawyer role, building those standards and hung. I've seen you speak a ton about standards in the industry. The fact is because we're so speed oriented, we tend to hire and say, great, now just get me your 16 hires this quarter. I started thinking about, well, you know what? There's some base skills, but there's also some base practices, and there's some practices that are standard to your brand. So I know, Tiffany, you're with S&P, and there's a lot of different players similar to S&P, but everyone is going to have a unique brand. And so the question I go back to is when we help to create time, how do you shift those behaviors through incentivization, but also your training, your brand coaching, your one-on-ones that are really focused on the other metrics you're trying to get people to. And that does take people investment from leaders. And so it is a different I think, Hong, it's a hard thing to do because we've been so tuned in the last 10 years about how many, how much, how fast. I'm now shifting to how enjoyable, how satisfied, how many of you retained, what is that relationship kind of benchmark you're trying to create? Those things will be a big shift, I think, over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, really well put, Charles. And in fact, I think we've got to be very strong on that. People, leaders who are watching this show, like you have to recognize you got to go to bat for the kind of the value of the intangible. It's very easy to say here the numbers. And data-driven sort of decision making, of course, we're all into that. However, at the same time, we can't only look at the numbers. There's a lot of qualitative work that recruitment and the people ops function generally performs. That I feel has been lost in the conversation over the last several years. But AI agents, I think, will bring it back to the fore because that's where our real value, I think, is going to be revealed. Tiffany, let's go back to you. S&P Global is not a straightforward organization. It's a venerable organization. It's a complicated beast. We've talked about sort of getting, the acquisitions that you guys have done recently as well. How do you kind of make sure that when you're rolling out sort of AI agents, such a big revolutionary step, that you kind of maintaining a sort of a consistency across all of these different regions, different functions, and different cultures, really. Did you have a plan around that? And can you tell us about how you did it?
Yeah, so first I'll kind of answer the first part of the question and talk a little bit about how do we balance global standardization and local nuances here at S&P, and then I'll kind of talk a little bit about how we took that approach and integrated it in our deployment plan. So, we always like to start with like, what is the standard process, right? Like start with the standard blanket process, and then from there we then look at what are the nuances, like where are there nuances, and I think the biggest part is why are there nuances, right? Because I think people have a tendency to lead with exceptions and nuances and make assumptions that their processes are so nuanced, right? Because it's their process. But when you really start to getting to asking the why, you start to uncover one or two things. Either one, it's not nuanced from the global process. It may just be called something different, right? In that particular country, in that particular region, but the outcome is the same, right? The input and the output is the same. And then secondly, we also uncover under asking the why that there really isn't a real business or statutory reason of why something is nuanced. So it's also a way to be able to eliminate and remove some of the waste from the system, right? And so that's kind of the approach that we do here at S&P. It's like start with the global process, start with the standard, then work our way back from the nuances, and then really start to dig into like what is the why? Why is this nuance, right? What is the business reason, right? Does this business reason apply to other business reasons? Is there a statutory reason? Is there a regulatory reason? And then really start to uncover because like once you start asking people why, they'll start to kind of align and say, well, no, it is more aligned to the global process. So then to the second part of your question and how do we take that philosophical approach and then apply it to our deployments? We like to start with a phased approach. So particularly when we rolled out Good Time, we did it in phases. So we started first in Americas, right, where we know we had a high enough volume, but we knew that there were less nuances, right? We knew that there was less complexity from a region perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from a statutory perspective. And then what we did is every rollout, we iterated, right? We leveraged our lessons learned. Then we rolled out APAC and EMEA, where our volume was a little bit less, but it's more complex, right, and related to the, global that country landscape. And then lastly, we rolled it out ultimately to India, where we have our highest volume. But we were able to take the lessons learned from the previous deployments and then apply it to our most complex region. But then in parallel, as we were deploying out the other regions, we were working with the regions to say, like, hey, this is what we're seeing, for Americas. Will this work for you? Will it not work for you? Why? And then I think in addition to rolling it out globally, we also phased our solution deployment. So we went with Good Time Meet first, and then we launched Good Time Hire, and that's where we took the regional phased approach. So I think having that type of guiding principles and related to what really is the definition of a nuance. I think that's helpful. And then making sure that you have a really well-defined hypercare period after each launch to really be allow the team to be able to identify any challenges. And then that gives them the flexibility to quickly iterate and refine for the next launch.
Yeah, I really like that. I need to ask you, what were the lessons you learned? Was there any that come to mind straight away here, Tiffany? Like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, we can't do that in EMEA, that kind of thing.
It was less about the countries. I would say it was more about our Workday product, right? I think we were working off of some, historical legacy workflows, and we had went in with the assumption that we could, update those on the back end. So I would say like really looking at your workflows, making sure you kind of define as much as your workflows and optimize your Workday workflows as possible. And I think the second part for us is like don't underestimate the support that you'll need from like your O365 team if you're like an Outlook or Microsoft shop, because that was important for us, right? We really needed to partner with our O365 teams really to be able to build that integration between the tool and our Outlook system. So I think those were the two things from an implementation for S&P that I would just make sure that you're aware, very well before you go in.
Yeah, fantastic. Got some questions coming in from the audience. I just want to throw this one at you, Tiffany. If you could wave a magic wand, that knowing what you know now, you could just zoom back 12 months and you could say, okay, what's the one thing that you would kind of do differently from the implementation? Anything sort of pop in your mind?
Not necessarily. I think we did a really good job putting together that project plan in advance. We did really great socializing. I think change management is important, right? We didn't have a lot of resistance from our recruiters or candidate care. They were waiting to get the tool. We had really great support from all of our senior executives because we told a really good story of how is this going to add value to the organization. We were able to leverage Good Time and not only use it for one use case. So we use it for obviously our recruit to hire workflow and our interview scheduling, but we also use it for our coaching. So we have an internal coaching program here at S&P Global. So we was also able to use Good Time to be able to satisfy that use case as well. So we were really intentional about making sure that we had that solid business case and then really leveraging some of our other previous deployments and taking that same approach here. So I think it's just leveraging something that works well and just continuing to iterate on it.
Yeah, really good. I was going to ask you, like, how did you take the team along? But it sounds like the team is generally very much on board with the idea of, okay, we do need some support here, particularly, if you're taking 41 steps on that base case of trying to schedule an interview, of course they're going to be welcoming these some sort of support. However, there's always going to be people that are dissatisfied with the implementation in some way, or it's not optimal in their view, and they've got an opinion on it. How did you handle some of those kind of those kind of folks, Tiffany?
Yeah, I like to use the terminology show and tell, right? Like I think that's the best way to do it is, I like to lean in and say, look, okay, let's try it, right? If it does not work, or if then we can have the option to maybe repivot, right? And so I think that's the important part of deploying any technology. And I think specifically now about AI is you have to be able to be comfortable with trying something. And if it doesn't work, then pulling it back, right? And then retrying something else. And I think we took that approach. And because we were able to build that partnership and that type of collaboration, with our end users and, with our recruitment team, it helps to be able to build that trust. Because I think, again, when we talk about AI, it's that trust element that really is what drives the adoption and the utilization.
Yeah, and it's this classic kind of change management, isn't it, Charles? Like, so, all of the basic stuff that we know about change, you got to bring people with you. You got to invite them to take part in the decision making. They got to feel involved. You don't just implement or impose something on them and expect to run with it. All of that seems to be there with Tiffany's case. Particularly, by the way, I love the the hypercare sort of after implementation. You've got to make sure you've asked people to change. You've got to be like over servicing that care component when they're embedding those new processes. Let's kind of sharpen the question a little bit on the technology side. Technology ostensibly is great. It's there to accelerate. It's there to help us get a more efficient, better experience. How do we? But it can go wrong. Like, how do we ensure when we do sort of implement new technology that it really supports the agility of the organization rather than it becoming just another thing that the users and operators need to learn, another thing that they need to make sure is a check in the box they've got to go through. Any thoughts on that, Tiffany?
I think it's about doing your due diligence, right? I think you mentioned earlier how, every organization has similarities, but they also have cultural nuances, and understanding what those cultural nuances are. It's also making sure that you have that strong partnership, specifically for HR, with your digital solutions or your IT team to understand like where are they going from a journey from a technical, technology ecosystem perspective. So we really looked at like three things. Like one, how does this integrate with our existing tech stack? Right? To your point, what is the agility for it to be able to grow and, mature with us as an organization? Right. And so again, like asking your vendors, like, what does that roadmap look like? Like, okay, what is, the first year, but also what is your beyond the first, your 2 to 3 year plan? And then also just understanding to give that partnership about where are there nuances, and then understanding where that flexibility is, to be able to develop and build that product. So I think it's really about knowing your organization, knowing what your organization's priorities are, and then making sure that you're selecting technical applications that align to your organization's priorities, and then are able to be agile enough to be able to pivot really quickly if those priorities change.
Yeah, really, really interesting. A question for you, Charles. AI agents, what role do they play in ensuring that, you've got this globalized business, complex local nuances. How do AI agents support like a consistent kind of rollout? What's your thoughts on this consistent experience, I guess, for the people involved?
Yeah, I think when I think about consistency and I think also about pre-AI era, one thing never changes, and Tiffany says process workflows. I remember having a recruiting team, multiple recruiting teams, so it doesn't matter which company, they all had the same problem, which is when it comes to scheduling or recruiting, there could be 20, 30, 40 different ways of doing the same thing. So I think in order for agents to work incredibly well to create consistency, it's not just, and Hung, you mentioned, it's like pulling it off the shelf and saying, great, we turn it on. And back to your point about adoption, is that you have to look at the workflows first. And when you look at the workflows, you understand what's unique to yourself, what could be unique to a region, but also what are the baseline expectations of how the AI delivers something, whether it's scheduling, sourcing, whatever you think of within talent acquisition. I think the key point here is to really also understand that where agents come in, it is handling that consistency. If I just use scheduling as a basic path, which is being able to connect two people together based on availability, based on region, based on office. But then when the complexity kicks in, the algorithms that you design through your workflow, it is, if Hung, you can't interview today, suddenly, who is your backup? But it's not that backup where it just keeps on repeating the same backup. It's like realizing that Charles has actually been backing up Hung 25 times in the last month. So it's time to go after Tony, who hasn't stepped up yet. That's where I think it create consistency, is that experience is still controlled. To the fact is, it's not a, back to you asked earlier, agent versus non-agent, is non-agent would be is the same repeatable piece, that experience starts to deteriorate where the agents start to create consistency based on experience for both parties, right? It's best for the fact that, Charles is constantly back end hung because he's burning out, but also that Tony can hop in. But then also the fact is if Tiffany was a candidate, her experience doesn't deteriorate. So I think that's one big piece of consistency where agents can play. I think the other piece, Hung, is knowing also when humans need to intervene. And I know the word intervene comes up a lot. In our view, intervention is really about when do humans partner. So that consistency also then creates a pocket of opportunity for the fact is if Hung, you're coming now to the campus to the campus, who's going to greet you, who's going to take you to the room, who makes sure that everything is tick and tied, that Hung actually loves to have hot chocolate or coffee. Those things could be very helpful for the interviewer to understand and actually accelerate the interview process and wow you with the opportunity. So when you ask the question about consistency, I think agents, number one, have to have smart consistency. Number two, where do you apply the human? But most importantly, I go back to the start. It's that workflow and it's the change management that comes with it. I think last thing I'll say here is where it hasn't worked well, I've seen in some companies, and it's human nature, so it's not good or bad, it's just it happens, is the assumption of I had this process that was with a non-AI based tool or tech stack, and then say, now AI is here, let's just plop it on top and make it work. That would become very difficult to accomplish and actually see through. And that's why when Tiffany mentioned about workflows, it just brought a lot of good and learnings for me in terms of opportunities and how do we not only ensure there's consistency through workflow, but it's also the change management that needs to happen.
Yeah, and there's also that dynamic interaction between human recruiter and AI agent colleague,
Exactly.
isn't there? I mean, there's moments where we might pre-plan the human intervention, but there's also moments where the AI agent may be able to alert the human team to say, "Hey, listen, we're picking up signals that this candidate needs a phone call." It's and it needs it from a human being. So I think that would be it would feel like an optimal case if we could have a friend like that just to keep an eye on, candidate sentiment or, whether the risk factor of a dropout is happening or whether, on the hiring manager side, perhaps the hiring manager has suddenly gone quiet on feedback. Like what's going on there? Maybe we need to check in on that person. So
Sure.
yeah, loads of interesting things are going to emerge in our field. Question for you, Arian. And this is kind of sitting because Good Time obviously deals with loads of companies that have multinational, global sort of reach. So you must have seen sort of companies alongside S&P that have tried to do global rollouts. Where would you say is kind of generally the right place to start on something like this? If this consistent experience is the goal, is there like a pattern? Like how do you start with this?
Absolutely. I think there's a pretty clear, distinctive pattern that we've witnessed over the last 8 to 9 years, is that when there's we've definitely seen decentralized TA orgs. Obviously, if the company is huge and on a global level, there's always pull to want to have more of a decentralized TA, or each region wants to do their own things because there's nuances to the way they do things because of the culture and everything. Or sometimes each department wants to do their own things because their department head wants to design their hiring process to their own liking. And there's, a group of companies that are more of a, decentralized TA organizations. Even if it's very global and huge organization, it has really strong leadership, with really strong vision and mindset. Typically, we see a lot more success with implementation of AI agents or actually any technology when the centralization is in place, the org centralization, and also if there's really strong leadership with the really strong vision. I think that's where partnership with Tiffany and Eddie was really a complete slam dunk because from the very beginning, almost from like day zero when we started, started the conversation, we knew that there's a really strong leadership here with really clear vision where we could really partner together and create a really amazing experience for all stakeholders, even if the S&P is a really amazing, huge company. But with that vision and with that really strong leadership, we were able, and that's centralized organization, we were able to do the really successful rollout. So I think that's a really strong pattern that we've definitely seen. So I would say without even before software, I would say the right place to start is really looking at your organization. And if you really want to create consistent experience at the global level, I think that organization really needs to be centralized or and or have really strong TA leadership that can have that consistency and be able to recommend the consistency across the entire organization. And I would say that's a really distinctive pattern that we've witnessed across hundreds of customers that we've worked with.
Yeah, fantastic, Arian. And sort of systems do matter, particularly these complicated organizations like S&P Global. They're gonna have complex systems already. Nothing is greenfield at this stage of that maturity of that organization. Hot in the heels of Workday Rising. What makes sort of Good Time, particularly well suited to integrate with an enterprise product like Workday and other sort of enterprise scale products of this type?
Yeah, it's a great question. Workday, for example, Workday is a powerful system. I think it's almost become a de facto enterprise ERP system and also an applicant tracking system. But with that the powerful system, there's complexity, and that learning curve can be somewhat steep. I think orchestra really brings the another layer on top that really allows the tasks to be completed automatically between stakeholders, candidates, interviewers, recruiters, RCs, and those tasks to be completed. And we would sync the information actions back into Workday for audit trail without really, people having to do anything. It's really the system, orchestra as a system is talking to Workday as a system. And that really makes the mundane work kind of disappear into the background and actions just being automatically done. And that kind of lowers the learning curve when it comes to complex system like Workday. So and also what that does is that leaves human interactions to humans. So I think really that's where enterprise software is going. And I think that's why really with the systems like Workday, having that orchestration layer like Good Time is really helpful for large organizations where there's so many stakeholders, and learning a powerful system like Workday is really, it's just a lot, it's huge investment and in L&D. And having that AI agent that can actually complete the tasks without having to learn such complex system is, I think, a huge benefit and value add. And that's where orchestra really comes in as that orchestration layer on top of Workday.
Okay, thank you, Arian. Can you kind of dumb this down a little bit for me? What does it look like from a task point of view? So you talk about sort of AI agents working within and around, sort of interoperating with Workday, for instance, to complete tasks. Can you give me like an illustration of what one of those tasks might be? That'll help me kind of visualize what we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. So orchestra does a lot of things behind the scenes. So such as application evaluation, when applications come in, for example, our AI will evaluate based on how the candidates have answered the application questions and their resume, and also what hiring managers are looking for, their kind of internal criteria that may not be on the job description. We are able to actually evaluate kind of evaluate and sort the application based on the fit, and kind of sort the application to where maybe the top 10% is surfaced to the top of that a huge list of candidates, so the recruiters can actually pay attention to the right set of candidates and be able to uh, you know um, spend the right time with the right candidates. That's one of the things the orchestra does. And also orchestra automatically coordinates interviews, whether it be simple interviews at extremely high volume or very complex interviews. And also orchestra engages with candidates, answer any questions that they may have about benefits, PTO, and so on 24/7. And also orchestra prepares interviewers and candidates for upcoming interviews by providing information that they need to have to be able to successfully do the interviews together and also gather interviewers' feedback, summarize interviewers' feedback for hiring managers' review. Also, Orchestra is extremely good at gathering insights, such as candidate NPS, and also Orchestra is able to provide sentiment analysis, so we understand maybe from the entire hiring process perspective, maybe candidate NPS was extremely high at the beginning, but then maybe candidate NPS drops to 6 out of 10 towards the end of the process. We know where the process is really breaking. So that kind of analysis and insights we are able to provide to the human counterparts. That's another thing the orchestra does. Another thing would be orchestra can analyze insights such as interviewer calendar health and we can provide that insight to recruiting team and tell them, hey, these are some bad actors when it comes to maybe blocking all of their calendars so that they're not receiving any interview invites, or there are some good actors where they're really stepping up and doing a lot more interviews and taking on more of the load, and really participating in the interview process more than others type of thing. So orchestra has a lot of skill sets and play in multiple aspects of the hiring process. And we are adding more and more skill sets to orchestra as time goes.
Do you know, Aaron, that feature alone, I think, is going to get you a few sales. I mean, hands up, folks. If you know some hiring managers out there that block book their entire calendars out so they don't do interviews, I think if you had a way to check on that, at least the existence of that sort of service is going to just make people behave a little bit better. And you get the other side of it as well. You get people who overcommit to interviews. I remember working back when in my operating recruiter days, some people were too sort of helpful in volunteering to be an interviewer and all this, and they end up spending all their time doing that. And you think actually they need to share the load. So having an agent sort of check on the calendar health, I think, is absolutely fantastic. Um, Question for you, Tiffany. This is a complex integration. What would you say, how did it improve for your team, the visibility and coordination between the different parts of the team? You got resources and human resources in different regions and different functions. How did the Good Time and Workday integration help everyone know, and get on the same page?
Yeah, I think it's more about the insights that it provided that we didn't have before, right? So like with leveraging, the scheduling capabilities, we're able to see like reschedules, right? What's the percentage of reschedules that are happening? And then in what particular business or function are they happening in? No shows, like who's not showing up to interviews? Is it the candidate or, is it the hiring manager? Capacity of the interviewers, right? We didn't have that. We talked a little bit about people that's always signing up to do interviews, right? So we didn't necessarily have that leverage of data and insights, the round of interviews that are taking place, right? So again, us being able to look at, are we doing too many rounds of interviews for certain job profiles or certain positions, and is there opportunity to be able to improve, Charles talked about like improve that workflow, improve that process, right? And I think cancellation, so for us it was about the coordination obviously, but the visibility into the insights that we did not to really be able to leverage that as a feedback mechanism, either for coaching with our hiring managers, right? Taking it back to, our recruiters or to our candidate care. We've also even been able to leverage it, providing these insights even to our own internal coaching and to like our thrive and our performance process, right? Like, do we need to, upskill our managers differently? We talked a little bit about that, calendar hygiene. So I think it was for us, it gave us more insights to really be able to coordinate and then create feedback mechanisms to really be able to understand where we are from a health perspective in our TA process.
Yeah, really, really good. Question for you, Charles. Technology sort of coming in at this point does seem to be, it's transformative. These aren't trivial sort of impacts that it's having on people operations generally. How do you think sort of the people ops teams and the recruitment sort of the talent acquisition teams are going to restructure now that we know that technology of this type actually works in production? Where do you see sort of the new structure going forward? What's it going to look like, Charles?
Yeah, that's a great question, Hung. I think what we're going to most likely see, and I think we're seeing it already, is in talent acquisition organizations. Let's start there first, is teams are increasingly becoming more and more kind of relationship-driven recruiters, right? I think they are getting smaller. I'm not going to kind of hold that back. We're hearing a lot of that in the TA community. It's become much more of a tighter relationship-driven team. And we saw a bit of that happening a while ago. It was through a lot of the shared service type of transformations in the people operations groups, but I think AI is definitely tightening that side, if not kind of really tightening that belt there. That said, I think Hung, the question I ponder, and I know you asked a question, but I think this is going to be decidedly discussed about between TA leaders is if my team is smaller, relationship driven, do the metrics change, right? Am I still doing 16 hires a quarter, if you're in tech industry, or am I going to do 8, or am I going to do 32? That will be one of those pivot points I think that will need to be discussed about. I think it'd be dangerous to go and push it as a pure efficiency play, because then your relationship piece completely gets diluted, right? So that's on the TA side. I think the operations world, and definitely I'm open to Tiffany challenging me on this one, is I do think teams get tighter there too, but I think tighter from a let's think about which are the most transactionary roles to which ones are the operational strategist roles. And I say that with a very fine line, the word strategy being very broad. I kind of put it back to program management is going to increasingly become more critical over time to thinking about, for example, campus hiring at scale, right? Like how to leverage more AI in that space without needing more campus recruiters, but then how to have that program run with the technologies, the underpinning. The other piece I think about is if you are on Workday, as an example, you're probably going to see more of a stronger Workday program play in operations where it's about making sure all those metrics tie back up to the central CHRO readout. And so you're going to see more of investment there, where in the past, a lot of the transaction or configuration work and all that may become a little bit more contractual or smaller. Those are things I'm seeing. I would say we're probably going to continue seeing a bit of transformation there. It wouldn't surprise me, Hung, that we think it's going to transform one way today and it completely turns upside down 3 years from now, as we've seen, 3 years ago, recruitment exploded in size and then we saw it shrink immensely. I think now we have to stop looking at sizes, but more looking at responsibilities and accountability based on the purpose that's driven by AIs. And I think that element is going to continue to evolve because we know AI is learning every minute that you feed new things to it, particularly agentic AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely the future is not fixed, very fluid, and we have to be brave in making forecasts, but also with a caveat that not be overly confident with our vision for what that looks like. And by the way, I've spoke to two sort of significant training companies that train TA, and both of them have independently confirmed to me that actually there's a big shift in demand in terms of training for soft skills, training for stakeholder management, training for empathy, and kind of a big switch away from some of those technical skills, which previously was their bread and butter, technical sourcing, Boolean search, and all that type of stuff. So that's kind of a very interesting. Small data points, obviously, but I think it kind of aligns with where we're seeing the AI's impact in how we're thinking about what the humans are going to be doing. Okay, cool. Let's just switch now to questions popping into from the audience. By the way, folks, if you do have any questions for any of our wonderful guests here, do you make use of the Q&A function at the bottom? We've got Hannah sort of beavering away, picking those up for us. And we're going to sort of answer the questions there that we're not able to write an answer to on text. So first one here for Tiffany. What tips do you have in terms of making a business case for investing in AI agents? And this, I guess, I mean, you've managed to do it, Tiffany, so well done you. But your advice to other folks that are thinking, yeah, all this sounds great, but you know what? I've got this dragon of a CFO, and that person is just a no on everything. How do I convert this person? What tips do you have for that individual?
Yeah, I think the first thing is have a lot of patience. Like, very transparently, I think you have to have a lot of patience and you have to have a lot of grit. All right. I think what we did a great job of doing here at S&P, and again, it wasn't easy for us to really kind of, really shape that story because, AI was still so new, right? And so and it's still new today. So people are still trying to understand what that return on investment looked like. But it really starts at what problem are we trying to solve, right? And then be able to show data points that it's a real problem. So we leveraged feedback from our sentiment surveys, right, where we had our hiring managers as well as like recent candidates provide some feedback that was less than optimal, about their, scheduling experience. We coupled that with we did a walkthrough to show like how many steps it's currently taking the team today, right? And then how that then translate to less steps. We also then use data and we're related to like, okay, if we didn't have a scheduling solution and we continue to hire at the volume that we're hiring at, like this is an additional amount of heads that we would need to be able to support the volume at the optimal experience that we want to give versus this is what that investment would look like from a technology solution. And then I think we also talked about when we presented the business case, like what's the value you're going to be able to get on day one, right? Because I think that's the thing too, is like with AI, people want to see immediate value on day one. And then what does that value look like over time, right? And so be very clear of making sure that you're maybe solving for a short term, but also thinking about what's that medium and long-term solution that you can also be able to tell that story, to your finance or to your senior executives, because they want to be able to see, the whole longevity, right? This is a long-term investment. So they want to be able to see that, they're going to get value every step of the way of that investment. So I think it's
Yeah.
very, very clear on what that business case is and being able to have a solution and an outcome that matches it.
Yeah, fantastic. I think Tiffany needs to open up a sideline business, doing business case development coaching for the TA function. That's the fantastic stuff, Tiffany. Really interesting. And yes, sell the pain. You got to tell people, okay, this is how much it hurts doing it now. You may not feel it because we're used to it, but hey, these 41 steps that cost us money. And yeah, I love the idea that there's actually two different objectives. There's the immediate day one hit, and then what's the long-term play 3, 4, 5 years down the track. Okay, we're running short on time, folks, so we're gonna have to just blast through these questions real quick. Let's do another one here. Anybody can answer this, but maybe Aaron and Tiffany, you got a thought on this particular one. How do you navigate the compliance and regulatory environment when you're rolling out a sort of AI? And I guess there's two sort of frames here. Number one, the AI does change. This is it's not static, and neither is the regulatory environment. That's also not static. And also, let's throw in when you're doing a global rollout, you might actually be dealing with different sort of jurisdictions who have different sort of rules on what is good to go. How do we deal with this? I think this is the biggest thing that basically slows down and decelerates AI adoption is as a kind of fear of compliance risk. Any thoughts?
From vendor perspective, what we do is to make sure that we're always on top of all the rules that are coming out. And we have a dedicated team that is always paying attention to the new laws that are coming out. There are laws that are coming out in the United States and in Europe, and even in the United States, there are, specific laws that are coming out of some municipalities in particular states and so on. So it's becoming even more and more complex. Uh, but we just have to be on top of it. And for example, we just completed an audit, and also we are actually going through another audit for a different AI launch that just came out also. So I think at the end of the day, what we are focusing on is being a really amazing partner to our customers and making sure we are always on top of it. We have a team that is really keeping our engineering team also within creating the product within the guideline of um, the law as well as the ethical guidelines as well to make sure that we are providing the product within that provided guidelines and being a really amazing partner to the customers, and also providing the audit trail to our customers so that so we just went through multiple audits, and right now we are also going through another audit really proactively, but also at the same time we're actually building capability for our customers to actually audit their own results using our AI as well. So we're just like investing heavily into it. That's kind of from vendor perspective.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And by the way, folks, that's actually a key question to ask vendors. Where are they? What is their relationship between their legal department and their engineering and product teams? Do they conduct audits? How are they going to make how are you going to protect the potential users of the software? What steps are you taking? And I know that Arian and all the folks at Good Time have really been, taking a leadership position on this. The human-centered AI has been sort of a core value for you guys going forward. Okay, folks, we're coming to the end of time. We're over time. I do believe we're going to get just brusquely kicked off. So we have to just rush this to a close. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Everyone who has registered will get a recording of this video, so you can watch again at your leisure. If you haven't seen it for the first in live, you can watch it again there. And of course, if you're interested in learning more about this case study or using or investigating Good Times Orchestra AI agents, do check out goodtime.io. Goodtime.io, it's worth your while. In fact, the website's got loads of resources in any case, but definitely check them out if you want to use AI agents effectively, but also ethically. Thank you very much for watching, everyone.